Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Many thanks to staying with us on Early Exchange. Before we begin the conversation this morning, let's take a listen to the president's speech at the national broadcast that he made yesterday in respect to the nationwide protest. All right, we'll get to that pretty soon, but let's get to meet my guest first and then begin the conversation. So, Sam Orovwuje, who is a public policy expert and also public affairs analyst, is in the studio this morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Blessing. A pleasure to be here.
Glad you have joined us.
Good morning, Femi. Thank you. Thank you.
So, has it been for you in the course of the past week, over the weekend, and now to Monday? What's the change? What did you find different today that perhaps wasn't the case Thursday, Friday?
Yeah, there was a voice from the citizens in terms of what you call the hunger protest and bad governance protest between Thursday, Friday, and essentially to part of Saturday and yesterday. That dynamics change the scenarios, particularly in the city of Lagos, in terms of commerce and ability to do business. Was disrupted to a very large extent. But thankfully, yesterday, the president was able to address the nation in a way that in conciliatory and calling for dialogue with a view to resolving the crisis. Maybe as we progress, there are about 38 or 36 paragraphs of that address. Maybe when we have specific questions, be able to speak to some of them based on understanding of that particular speech. But in my personal view, I think that speech, to a very large extent, was conciliatory in a way that the protester may have seen that their voice at least has been heard from the government. Whether the issues that were raised have been adequately addressed remain to be seen as we progress.
So the presidential address is ready, and let's take a bit of it and then return to continue the conversation.
That only democratic good governance can provide. One that is open, transparent, and accountable to the Nigerian people. For decades, our economy has remained anemic and taken a dip because of many misalignments that have stunted our growth. Just over a year ago, our dear country, Nigeria, reached a point where we couldn't afford to continue to use to solve long-term problems for the sake of now and our unborn generations. I therefore took the painful yet necessary decision to remove a subsidy and abolish multiple foreign exchange system, which had constituted a noose around the economic jugular of our nation and impede our economic development and progress. These actions block the greedy profit that smugglers and rent seekers made. They also block the undue subsidy we had extended to our neighboring countries to the detriment of our people, rendering our economy prostrate. These decisions are made were necessary if we must reverse the decades of economic mismanagement that didn't serve us well. Yes, I agree. The buck stops on my table. I assure you that I am focused fully on delivering the governance to the people, good governance for that matter. In the past 14 months, our government has made significant strides in rebuilding the foundation of our economy to carry us into a future of plenty and abundance. On the physical side, Aggregate government revenue has more than doubled, hitting over 9 naira in the first half of 2024 compared to the first half of 2023 due to our efforts at blocking leakages, introducing automation, and mobilizing funds creatively without additional burden on the people. Productivity is gradually increasing in the non-oil sector, reaching new levels and taking advantage of the opportunities in the economic ambience.
That was the president addressing the nation yesterday in view of the nationwide protest that began on August 1st. All right, he's talked about a lot of things. For time's sake, we cannot allow the full broadcast to repeat. But of course, most of the things that the president talked about are in public domain already. While he appealed to the protesters and made mention that he's aware of the pains and sufferings of Nigerians. He talked about what his administration has been doing over the past 14 months. First of them was the removal of fuel subsidy, which the protesters have demanded a reversal. And then the president says, painfully, that cannot be done because owing to that, in the first quarter of 2024 alone, revenue has increased to about 9.1 trillion naira. What's your view on that? How do you think the protesters would take this, that their demand, the first demand, which is a reversal of the removal of fuel subsidy policy, would not be possible given the position and explanation of the president?
First and foremost, I think we must thank the president for coming out courageously and boldly to address the nation, particularly with the recent protests from Thursday and perhaps yesterday in some states. It is conciliatory in the way I mentioned earlier during the intro. But what is key is that that demand for the reversal of the fuel subsidy, in my view, will not be sustainable. But then, since he has called for dialogue, he'll be able to put data across to the conveners of the protest and look at the cost-benefit analysis of the fuel subsidy removal, the impact it has had in the last 14 months or thereabout. But key for me is that the government should be more proactive in terms of responding to citizens' demand. But then the president has called for dialogue. We have no option than to dialogue. But then the issues that spark up the protests, in my view, were not really addressed in terms of what are the actual milestones, the deliverables for some of those promises that were made in clear terms. And I think for strategic communication's sake, those who are managing the president media powerhouse must find a way to move away from this military style of writing scripts where what is the prognosis of the problem, highly itemized, what are the major milestones towards resolving those issues, and the timeline so that citizens can see that the government is responsive, transparent, and accountable. These are just my personal views.
All right, let's get to the specifics of the broadcast now, which is the fact that the government revenue has doubled, an aggregate of 9.1 trillion naira, according to the president. You're aware that the removal of first subsidy could have also facilitated that, increase in government revenue. But the concerns or the questions being raised by Nigeria is if you say, okay, the revenue has increased 9.1 trillion naira, how has that impacted an average Nigeria? Has that justified the removal of first subsidy? Looking at the results, how do you react to these concerns?
In terms of revenue gain, there's a lot that has been achieved in the last 14 months. But the issue here is that the focus has always been on the federal government. I'm not a spokesperson for the federal government, but I'm just trying to put things into perspective. If you look at the revenue streams that have gone into the state and possibly the local government, it remains to be seen that some of the governors are not proactive in terms of responding to the demand in terms of how revenues are deployed in the state. Therefore, like the president mentioned in one of the paragraphs, that there will be discussion with state, particularly in terms of making land available for agriculture. I think the focus, as it were, should even focus more on the state government that have received a bigger chunk of revenue that accrue to the state. So if they were able to manage with X amount of money that they are receivable from the revenue account, has increased in some places 20, 30, 40%, as the case may be. What are they doing with those additional revenue that has come into the state? So these are the questions the civil society and citizens must equally ask their state government. And now that we have some semblance of local government autonomy, I think they should place essential demands on local government chairmen and their governors. What are they doing with this revenue, rather than just focusing on the federal government alone? But these gains, have they translated into the pockets of citizens? So I think the productivity is still a major question, and the issues of corruption, transparency, and accountability need to be addressed by the government, both national, subnational, and possibly the local government, because sometimes the challenge with citizens is that some of the things in government are so opaque that people don't even have access to what exactly is happening in those spaces. Once the government is more upfront in terms of proactive strategic communication, then citizens will be able to see what this government is doing and how do we address hunger in particular, because the people are crying that they're essentially the disposable income to purchase items that has been eaten deeply by the high level of food inflation and the general inflation has been so negatively impactful on citizens to live at a level where they can even become more productive.
All right. In respect to the participation of the state governance in trying to alleviate the sufferings of the masses, the president made mention of the plan and his discussion with his meeting with the governors and ministers to accelerate food production. Now, he says the plan is to cultivate about 10,000 hectares of land, and the federal government will provide the incentive to support this initiative while the state governors provide the land. And the plan is to have people who will come under the employ of government to work at these farms, while they've also ordered mechanized farming equipment, which it says already on their way. Do you think that's enough involvement of the state governors in trying to tackle the problems of the economy right now, since more funds are being given to them, asking that they provide the lands? Is that enough involvement? Are there more that the state governors can do, since they're receiving more revenue from the federal governments?
I think it's just an incentive or an initiative from the federal government. And by the constitution, the land is domiciled with the state governor. So the federal government does not have any land based on the constitutional provision. So the president is saying that state governors should make land available, and the inputs and other derivatives that will be used to set up those farms, they will provide. But then beyond the speech, like I mentioned earlier, when you make speech and there are no real timeline and deliverable, it becomes a major problem in the public space. Okay, you want to do farms. What are the levels? Where is the tractor coming from? When are they going to arrive? the discussion with the state, what land has been made available, what are in place. These are some of the strategic things they need to do so that the citizens can see that the government is serious. On the other hand, the state government that have additional revenue must find a way to support the citizens from various states in addition to the promise that the federal government has made. So what do you do with those additional revenue? What kind of support system do you provide for citizens so that they can increase their productivity? And once the productivity is increased, then your level of taxation from citizens will equally go up. But when citizens are impoverished, businesses, particularly informal sector, are not productive, to what extent can government even improve its revenue base, particularly internally generated revenue? These are the questions that citizens should ask their state governors, and governors should be more accountable, particularly with the additional resource that has been made available, particularly the savings from the first subsidy removal. To what extent can this impact the citizen? These are the conversation that citizens should be asking, and when they go into this dialogue with the federal government, they should come to the table with data as well, so that we can see how we can deliver value for the common good.
All right, still on the issue of revenue, there are some lawmakers and even some Nigerians who came up with this narrative, like you said earlier, that rather than, channel this protest towards the federal government, that this protest should have taken place at the state level and even at the local government level. Now that it's obvious that from the federal allocation, more revenues have gone to states, and to the local government. How is it possible for the citizenry to hold government at the state level and at the local level accountable? Now, looking at the development of the protest now, today is day 5, this is the 5th day. Would you expect that the protest should be localized, as some have argued, in a way that is channeled towards the state governors and even the local government chairman? Because the governors were in the first place, closer to the people, and now extension to the local government. How possible it is for this agitation to have a channel towards the state and the local government in getting further results, apart from staging a protest at the national level?
If you look at the media scan in the last 4 days, you can see that even those protests were not domiciled only in Abuja, which is the federal capital territory. Some other states, the protesters gather in state. Therefore, the message was loud and clear, even to state governors, because they were present apart from Abia, that came out very strongly, that they didn't take part in the protest. Some of the demands, like I mentioned, if you look at an aggregate of what has happened, you have some of those protests addressing the peculiarity of what is going on in the state. Edo State in particular equally dealt with issues that are peculiar to Edo State. Some other states did. Therefore, I think in terms of voices, the governors equally have gotten the signal that the citizens are not happy. So when they go into their economic council meeting, where the governors are present, I'm sure this issue is going to resonate with them. But on the part of the National Assembly, there's equally a call that there should be some decorum in terms of the way they conduct themselves, and see how, though they've made some pledges on salary and pay cuts, which citizens feel that is not sufficient. So by and large, the protests represent every levels of governance. I think the title is bad governance. So I think from local, subnational, up to the federal level. But I think my appeal is that since the government has called for a dialogue, I think that is the best way to resolve issue. They should go into the table and find a way to resolve those grievances, and place more accountability and transparency on the part of the government. Then the citizens themselves must equally behave in a responsible manner. When you go for protest, don't destroy public infrastructure, which are a collective wealth of citizens. So citizens too must be accountable in terms of their behavior. So it's not just sufficient to gather to protest. Are they responsible citizens first and foremost? Because you're as good as your leader, and your leader is as good as you. So we must strike a balance on how we can resolve national issues.
So, talking about striking a balance, it is one thing to put funds to ensure that the economy moves. It's another thing to monitor to ensure that these funds go where they should go. Now, according to the president, yesterday he mentioned that more than 570 billion naira has been released to the 36 states to expand livelihood support to citizens, while 600,000 nano businesses have benefited from the federal government's nano grants. Additional 400,000 more nano businesses are expected to benefit. Uh, as well, 75,000 beneficiaries have been processed to receive 1 million micro and small single digit interest loans starting from August. But let's go back to the 570 billion naira released to the 36 states to expand livelihood support and the 600,000 nano businesses that have benefited from nano grants. Now, this is a time where we talk about the interest rate being at an all-time high because the Central Bank of Nigeria is implementing a tight monetary policy. And so access to funds is crucial for businesses, whether they're nano, micro, small, or even big businesses. And then the government says 600,000 nano businesses have benefited from grants. Should there be some monitoring to ensure that these funds actually got to 600,000 nano businesses? These people are the engine room of the economy. Shouldn't the economy be feeling the effect of these grants given to nano businesses?
I like the metaphor you use. Should the economy be feeling the effect? The point here is that the government may be doing so much, but then when transparency and accountability is not brought to bear, then people speculate. The point here is that there are various agencies and departments of government that are saddled with the responsibility of disbursing these funds to nano and medium enterprises. So who are these agencies? Who are the beneficiaries? So, and that's why I talked about strategic communication. I think government need to move away from this one-sided communication or one-way communication strategy that the information managers have been used to over time. So if government release 600 and something billion naira, then the various agencies, if it's Bank of
The
Industry,
government is giving grants to
no, yes, that's the point.
600,000 nano businesses.
Yeah, that's the point I'm making. So, who are these nano businesses? Who are the agencies releasing this money? What is in the public domain in terms of the number of people, the various sectors within this nano framework that have received food and beverage, manufacturing, whatever? We need to have those things in the public domain. We've moved away from where the secrecy oath that public servants signed to during the colonial time that has come into this level. If you make funds available, I think you should just put it in public domain. You can take a full page of newspaper. When you release them bash, what are these enterprises? Are they registered enterprise? Are they individuals? Are they politically inclined to get those benefits? Once you put those things, then people become aware of what you're doing. Two, do you have independent consultants that are saddled with impact and evaluation of these funds? What is the level of impact in terms of this money's release? Did they go into the wrong hand and they don't reflect the economy generally? So these are the critical questions those dialogue should bring about. You release SY. Where are this money? Who are responsible? Who benefited? Once we know that, then we'll be able to understand the mechanism of measurement. And from time to time, you know exactly what the government is doing. So it's not just sufficient to mention figure. What are the impact? What are the milestones? At what point was this money released? Is it the central bank? Is it the Bank of Industry? Is it the Small and Medium Enterprise Agency? Or is it really released to the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria or any association that is responsible for managing those small and medium enterprises? Or to get to that level where you have full disclosure, as it were, of what really happened with this money, then speculation and citizen apathy will always be there.
Now, let's look at what the president said as regards the oil and gas industry. He made mention of the fact that his administration has embarked on what you call resurgence of that industry. And also the claim is that the oil production has increased to 1.6 million barrels per day. Now, you're aware of what has, trailed the first quarter of this year, where these was oscillating between 1.2, 1.4 million barrels per day. And looking at the peculiarity of that industry, Nigerians are where we are, or the economy is what it is today, because there's a sensitive industry, which is the oil and gas industry, that, controls the bulk or the chunk of the revenue. Now, would you say this resurgence has started on a good note and is going to yield impact? Nigerians have been asked to wait. The essence of reading out all this is for Nigerians to know what the administration has done. But how long will this translate to a better life for Nigerians and the economy? So let's look at the oil and gas industry. The president is claiming, let me use that word, permit me, that oil production has increased to 1.6 billion barrels per day. How sustainable is that? Is that the best we can get from that industry?
That figure may be difficult to swallow if you look at the three elements that the OPEC use in assessing productivity in terms of the barrel that countries produce. Number one, they use the benchmark of their own indicator. They use a benchmark of exporting indicator, and they use a benchmark of independent people in the market. So if we put it on the average, maybe about 1.4 million barrel is done in a day. But based on the OPEC quota, I think that's not sufficient, particularly if you look at the size of the economy. And the issues, particularly in the Niger Delta, of oil theft and vandalization have not been fully settled. Therefore, the present projection of 1.6 is neither here nor there in my view. But what is important, we can see scale up the production quota with a view to driving in more revenue. The issues that has been on the public space, particularly with Dangote and modular refineries, where the president has given a directive that crude should be made available to local refineries. If such directives get through, and the Dangote and the modular refineries are able to get crude paid for in Naira, then I'm sure the productive capacity of Dangote and some of those modular refineries will help to improve on oil and gas sector. The president may have done well in terms of the ability to manage that sector, but we need more to be done in that sector to be able to improve on national productivity and the revenue. I think our revenue vis-a-vis the ratio of debt servicing and what is remaining for capital expenditure is provokingly worrisome. In that extent, therefore, the government must find a way to improve on the revenue base. And he talked about non-oil sector improvement. Maybe this farm initiative that is trying to put in place, if we can quickly get it through, then the next farming season, then maybe we'll have some abundance that will increase on the economic prosperity of Nigerians.
The president talked about the establishment of a consumer credit corporation with over 200 billion naira to help Nigerians acquire essential items without having the need to pay for them immediately. And he says that an additional 50 billion naira has been released for NEL Fund, H for NEL Fund, which is the Students' Loan and the Credit Corporation from the proceeds of crime recovered by the EFCC. Now, two questions. One, for the student loan scheme, during the protest, there were placards with inscription, "We want grants and not loans." Just is that to say that Nigerians are not in sync with the president's student loan scheme? They would rather have grants. And then to the Consumer Credit Corporation, there isn't much that is known about the scheme and even how Nigerians can be a part of it.
Okay, let me start with the credit scheme. A beautiful initiative, first and foremost. But then the challenge that flow from that is that people will only get credit when their credit rating is astoundingly good. What that means is that for you to be able to go to those credit scheme that the government has initiated, you must have some form of legitimate earning where the credit appraiser will shape the decision to give you as credit. And that's one of the challenge. So good initiative. But the problem is that most Nigerians are unemployed, and for you to be able to get credit, the elements of those who give out credit, they must look at your character, your capacity to pay back that credit. So that's maybe one of the challenge. But then I think they did more education, more information where those credits are domiciled, so that citizens who currently have jobs can have access to that. Once you have a credit scheme that can make people buy things and they're able to pay over a period of time, then that will improve on the cash that gets to people who are giving out credit, and government is able to get one or two things as well, because there will be some administrative sunk charges on those loans that you pay over a period of time. On the other hand, the distinction between a grant and a loan, what is important is that there's a loan space for students to have access to, but the protesters are saying they want grants. First and foremost, let's even take advantage of the current opportunity provided by the federal government and see how that scheme works. And I'm sure that over time, within that space, the law will equally take care of loans and grants when they become desirable. So I'm sure that sometimes people are limited in terms of what is in the framework for the student loan. People don't, Nigerians find it difficult to look at documents. So I'm sure loans and grants go together. There are categories of people who will have access to grants. Maybe if their research and whatever they are doing has gotten to a certain level, they will get some grant. Then those who just want to pursue regular means of education may just get loan. But culturally, people are not really used to this, and it will take some time for that to sync with people. But I think, by and large, that's a good initiative that will help some indigent people to put themselves through education, which is an essential ingredient, or if not the most potent ingredient for development.
Now, let's look at the issue of CNG, which is the compressed natural gas initiative launched by the president. Now, the plan is also to see how they can distribute about 1 million kits across the nation. Where is the missing link here? This has been on for months. And yet, I've seen few of these buses, some of these vehicles. But the greatest challenge has to be the fact that this initiative, there's a need to commercialize it. And that hasn't happened in a larger scale for the nation to feel the effects of this. What are the issues here, and what would be your recommendations as regards this initiative?
I think the commercialization issue is uppermost, trying to see how people can, first and foremost, those conversion beyond the government incentive. People must have the capacity in a way that they can even convert those cars first and foremost. Number two, I do know some of the major oil marketers already have CNG in place, particularly Mobil and Total. I think they are leading in that park in terms of having places where, but I think the government drive to see that conversion and achieve that 1 million, more education is needed, more information is needed, and the number of people that have benefited from that initiative is equally needed so that people get interested in that element. So policies are good. The implementation and the final beneficiaries, who are the citizens, is very critical to the success of that. So whichever ministry or agency of government that is responsible, they need to improve on the education, public information, the mileage that they have achieved so far in terms of those conversion. Some places in terms of even advert, even if they are marketing for those businesses, they need to put those companies in a way that people even know that they have access. So commercialization is a major bane of that sector, but it's a new initiative, and people will learn slowly. There's what you call early adopters of any product. So a few people will do that, and once it becomes successful with some people, and the success stories are put in the public space, more people will be interested. Again, what are the cost-benefit analysis in terms of conversion, even to the individual, which we talk about in terms of the commercial element of that initiative. Once you're able to sort that and able to bridge the gap between the policy framework and the beneficiary, then more people will come into that scheme.
All right, so where does this leave Nigerians now that the president has addressed the nation in Lagos today? So far on the island, there are no signs that the protest will continue today because a lot of persons and businesses are very open and it's almost as business as usual, except when we get to other parts of Lagos and get feelers from other parts of the country. But so far, in the 14 months of President Tinubu's administration, the plans that have been put in place and some other measures to cushion the effect of the removal of subsidy seem not to be translating right now into a drop in the price of goods and services, seem not to be translating to an easy economic condition for Nigerians, which in the first place brought about the protest. Despite the president's appeal and all he has said, where do you think this leaves Nigeria? What needs to be done more? What step should the president have taken or take right now to ensure that the clamor for a better economy, that call, Nigerians get a relief? And so it is not as if it is one protest that has stopped, and after a while, another starts again.
I think for me, what is critical and important to citizens is that the president has extended a kind of olive branch in terms of dialogue. So that's the first level. Dialogue is very critical to conflict resolution. So there's a window for dialogue. So those conveners of this protest, the federal government, via the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as an open hand calling people to table for negotiation. So this first element in terms of the resolution of the issues, and the convener must take advantage of this dialogue. So once they're able to dialogue, then the picture in terms of what the government has done, what the government intend to do, and the gaps and the challenges will be brought to bear on the table. On the other hand, citizens going to that negotiation must equally have facts and data to be able to dialogue with the government and see how we can remove the impediment to national development. Number two, citizens must equally go beyond the presidency and see how they can have dialogue as well with state government and local government chairmen. What do they have in terms of how to improve on the economy, in terms of productivity, in terms of providing employment for citizens? What are the opportunities in terms of finances to support informal sector businesses within the state, because some of the state equally have agencies for small and medium enterprises who are able to access a single-digit credit facility from some of these states and possibly local government. Once you are able to put these various elements on the table and we're able to put milestones, deliverable, the benchmark, and the challenges, and the citizens will be satisfied that within a short time, this challenge of bad governance and hunger, which is one of the either number one or two goal of the sustainable development goals, and to what extent can we really reduce hunger, where a country of over 200 million, some numbers, having what we call over 89 point something million that are suffering from multidimensional poverty, who live below an average of $1 a day, and a high level of food inflation, which is over 41 point something percent. These are really, really worrisome, and the government must come clean to the table and see how we can resolve this issue so that we don't get into another protest that we jeopardize the economic gain that the administration has had in the last 14 months. Because if you look at the Naira and Kobo element of what happened in the last 4 days to individual businesses and to even government in terms of revenue derivable from taxes that people pay to government in the last 4 days, those receivables didn't get to the government. Therefore, the economy is in a worse state than what it was before the protest started on Thursday. So we must speak to the Naira and Kobo of it, but we cannot speculate until we see the figure from the money market and the capital market how they fare in the last 4 days or thereabout.
All right. With that submission, I think we just have to leave this conversation here. Let's get to the other story, which is the good news coming from IMF, which is the fact that the board of governors have decided to increase the number of executive directors on the board. Presently, they are 24, but as that resolution was made to increase the number of executive directors to 25, specifically this slot is being given to the sub-Saharan Africa as a way of creating equal representation and then giving a voice to the African continent. What do you make of this decision, and what might likely be the impact?
I think we need to thank the Board of Governors of the IMF trying to talk about the corporate balance, equity, and particularly from sub-Saharan Africa that has been underrepresented. This new member that will make it a 25-member board is welcoming, but to what extent with the one man coming from Africa is able to influence some of the decisions at the IMF. But what is important is that once you have a space at the table, you are able to bring some things to bear. So hopefully, the inclusion of Sub-Saharan Africa board member will help to be able to articulate the core issues of Sub-Saharan Africa at the board level. And so where critical issues are discussed that concerns Africa, this board member should be able to articulate some of those issues for discussion and able to galvanize a kind of debate that will impact Africa as a member nation, Sub-Saharan Africa in particular now, as a member of the IMF Board of Governors. I think is welcoming, and let's see how this will shape the conversation of the IMF board in terms of when they have the next executive board meeting. I think the last one was held sometime in July. That's July 14 or 16. So let's see where they have the next board of governors, what is able to bring to bear, particularly the issues of IMF conditionality and the loan portfolio vis-a-vis IMF impact in Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa.
No doubt this addition, the 25th chair, will create greater influence for sub-Saharan Africa within the IMF body. But do you think this is something institutions like the UN can replicate? Because there have been calls for more representation by regions that's underrepresented. So maybe perhaps in the General Assembly, Security Council, the UN could come up with something like this for more inclusivity.
Yes, IMF is part of the United Nations system, the Bretton Woods institution. So that again is a major reform. But then there's a global call for reform of the United Nations system that people think has, to a very large extent, has outlived its usefulness in terms of international security and peace that brought about it in the first instance, where some big countries are supporting some other smaller nation against other minority nation in a way that jeopardize international peace and security. So that's global architecture, global reform for United Nations system should be done in a way that some other countries, but particularly from the global south, are fully represented in what they do. Then the big five should not be supporting some other nations against other nations. Because when you do that, you breach international peace and security. In that regard, therefore, there's a need for a total overhaul of United Nations systems and all the sister stations within that ecosystem to enhance inclusive and broad-based governance ecosystem that supports everybody across the globe.
Now, the new executive, directors of 25, they're expected to commence official responsibility in November. Now, what would you expect that Africa will do to take advantage of this window? And then these also developments also suggest to you the kind of, regional representation that should have happened as regards the constitution of the IMF. Talking about way forward now, how can Africa take advantage of this window and then the issue of equal representation among nations?
I think the point that now we have an executive director on the board, what is important to do is at the continental level, particularly the African Union, to be able to aggregate some of the challenges in terms of the relationship with IMF, the current issue in terms of loan portfolios, in terms of getting loan forgiveness. This should be channeled through the executive director who now represent sub-Saharan Africa. So we need to aggregate our position, and those positions will be brought to bear in the board. What is important again, being a member of the 25-member board, your ability to canvass a very strategic position is equally important. So it must have the political will, and it must find a way to have negotiations with various economic union within the Africa states, then the African at the continental level, and aggregate this point, which can be discussed at the board level for inclusiveness. And somebody is able to pursue some of those issues since you have representation at the table. But then Africa must support their own as well in terms of encouraging him to have the capacity to deal at that level.
Many thanks, Orovwuje, who is a policy expert and also a public affairs analyst, for being here with us on Early Exchange, looking at the nationwide protest vis-a-vis the president's nationwide address or national address. And let's hope that, yes, the situation gets better in Nigeria. There is peace widespread, and we hope for a prosperous Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.